Constantine and Methodius, you sent us holy men. June 18th, 860, the shores of Constantinople.
Methodius, Patriarch of Constantinople, stood on a wide balcony of the imperial palace and gratefully breathed in the fresh air. Below him, the city stretched out toward the harbor known as the Golden Horn, where several ships bearing the emperor's insignia bobbed on the sparkling surface. The burnished dome of the church of Hagia Sophia glowed under a blue sky. The world seemed so calm, so quiet. What a false impression one gets from this distance, he thought. The double set of walls kept the barbarians from swarming into Constantinople, he thought, but they couldn't stop the wave of fiery arrows launched from enemy ships in the harbor. The storm came ashore with the emperor. He and his navy had returned just in time to rescue the besieged city, but too late to save the outlying villages. Sudden rains quenched the fires, but flooding buried the rubble in mud. Methodius knew it would be days before the soldiers recovered all the bodies. Already he and his priests had performed hundreds of funeral rites. With a heavy heart, he stepped back inside. The emperor's advisors were gathering in the council room. Basil, one of the Caesars who ruled a portion of the empire under the emperor, glared at the patriarch as he entered. Methodius ignored him and took a seat at the table next to General Stephen. "Does Emperor Michael intend to go after our attackers?" "Fool!" hissed Basil. Methodius wasn't sure if the Caesar was referring to him or the emperor. It was common knowledge that Basil had his eyes on the imperial throne. Apparently, only the emperor mistook his ambition for loyalty. He pretended not to hear the remark. "Many of our people are still missing, General," Methodius continued. "Perhaps they have been taken prisoner?" General Stephen rubbed the back of his neck and turned bloodshot eyes on his companion. "The Rus do not take prisoners, Patriarch. They simply slaughter and burn everything in their path." Methodius was quiet as the other men took their seats. A private door at the end of the room banged open, and Emperor Michael barged in unannounced. 3 attendants followed close on his heels. "I want to know how this happened," he demanded, slamming a heavy goblet on the table. An attendant immediately filled the glass. No one spoke. "Have I hired children to run this empire?" Michael leaned heavily on the table and glared at his counsel. "Sir," replied the general, "they came like a wave of the sea. There was no time to—" "Enough!" interrupted Michael. "I will not accept excuses, only answers or resignations. How did the armies of Rus manage to get 200 ships into the Golden Horn?" The general dared not suggest it had anything to do with the absence of the navy. "Great Michael, may I make a suggestion?" asked Basil. "One of you must have something to say." Michael threw himself into the chair at the head of the table and drained his glass. "I believe it is time for us to renew our alliance with the Kaisers in the north." Michael gestured impatiently for the Caesar to continue. "From what our informants are able to tell, our enemies sailed down the Dnieper River into the Black Sea. Along the way, they ransacked several Kaiser villages. Clearly, they are as much a threat to the Dnieper region as they are to us." Michael turned to the general with one eyebrow raised. The Khazars do stand between us and Rus lands, General Stephen acknowledged. So, if we form an alliance with the Khazars, we would establish a line of defense between us and the Rus, Basil continued. In the past, we had success when we offered to help them build forts in the north. Photius shifted uncomfortably at the idea of using their neighbors as a shield. Still, he thought, we would be protecting our people and helping the Khazars defend themselves. And there are even more important consequences. He leaned in and addressed the emperor. The church could be invaluable in building such an alliance. Michael looked at him in surprise, as the patriarch rarely engaged in military discussions. Go on, holy Photius. The Khazars are a people of various races. In the Dnieper region, they are mostly Slavic. Yes? Our union with these neighbors would be stronger if we shared a religion. We should send missionaries to the Slavs. Photius was startled to hear Basil agree. The Khazars have moved into the Crimean Peninsula, north of the Black Sea, said Basil. We still control some of that territory and occasionally trade with local merchants. The Patriarch's missionaries might begin there. Proceed, ordered Michael. The general spoke up. Sir, we should first contact the leader of the Khazars and request permission to evangelize his people. Sending a boat full of missionaries into their community could be mistaken as a threat. True, Michael said. Photius, who do you recommend as an ambassador? There are only two people who could lead such a mission. The brothers Constantine and Methodius. The sons of Leo, former governor of Thessalonica. Yes, sir. You know the family? Constantine is a philosopher and a linguist, isn't he? His older brother, Methodius, governed for a time in Slavic territory before he joined a monastery. Photius nodded. The Slavs have been trading in the Thessalonian marketplace for years, so the brothers know their language and customs. Constantine was one of my brightest students when I taught in the imperial school. He knows Christian doctrine, and his brother would be a valuable assistant. Michael raised a hand to stop him. Your judgment in religious matters is superior to mine. Where are our new ambassadors now? The last I heard, they were in Bithynia in Asia Minor. Send messengers to search all the monasteries in Bithynia, ordered Michael, rising to his feet. I want Constantine and Methodius here immediately. His attendants followed him out. It took some time to locate the brothers, and it was autumn by the time they arrived in Constantinople. Photius met them at the palace, where they waited for an audience with the emperor. How good it is to see you again, my son, said the patriarch, embracing Constantine. His former student was thinner than he remembered, no doubt due to fasting and long hours of copying detailed manuscripts at the monastery. A crease in his forehead and shadows under the large black eyes gave him a serious appearance. But he was smiling. I have missed your conversation, holy Photius, Constantine declared. Have you ever met my brother, Methodius? He turned to the man at his side. We are honored to serve the church and the empire, Patriarch. Methodius bent forward in a gesture of respect. He was taller than his brother, and his beard had more gray. Though he wore the humble robes of a monk, he had the bearing of a Greek nobleman. As an attendant interrupted to announce that the emperor was ready for them. Your ambassadors have arrived, I see, declared Michael, greeting Photius and his guests. He peered intently at Constantine. You have been told about this mission? I have been told that you wish to build an alliance with the Khazars. Indeed, I have been in touch with the Kagan, leaders of the Khazar people, and he has sent me an interesting reply. He has agreed to allow our visit. More than that, Michael leaned back in his throne. Explain, Patriarch. Many of the Kagan's people are Jews, began Photius. The nearby nations are Muslim. The Kagan is under increasing pressure to accept one of these as the official religion of his kingdom. But he appears to be a most reasonable man. He has asked the emperor to send a Christian teacher to debate with Jewish and Muslim representatives. He will choose a religion after he hears all the arguments. The emperor broke in. According to the Patriarch, you are the only one capable of leading this mission, Constantine. Your brother has considerable diplomatic experience and will assist you. Methodius nodded politely and remained silent. If you are successful in this debate, the two of you will lead a new missionary effort among the Khazar Slavs, said Photius, leaning forward with excitement. God has given us a rare opportunity to declare his gospel to these people at their own request. Constantine agreed. My brother and I are honored to accept this task. I will send soldiers and servants to protect and assist you, said Michael. You will travel by way of the Black Sea and stop first in Cherson on the Crimean Peninsula. Cherson? Constantine looked at the emperor in surprise. There is much unrest in that area. You will gather military intelligence before finishing your journey north. Constantine glanced from Methodius to Photius to Michael. Emperor, may I make a request? Tradition says that Cherson is where the bones of the great bishop Clement of Rome are buried. The emperor tapped his fingers on his thigh. You wish to search for his remains? If you will grant us permission, it would be a remarkable discovery for the church. Very well, you may take an expedition while my military agents gather intelligence. But do not allow this quest to distract you from the debate with the Kagan, he growled. An alliance with the Khazars is a top priority for this empire. At the Patriarch's recommendation, I am trusting our security to you. It is an honor to serve God and the Emperor. Impatiently, Michael waved them out. It took several weeks to prepare for their journey. As soon as they had gathered all the personnel and supplies they would need for several months away, the brothers sailed north across the Black Sea. Constantine stood at the bow as they approached the port of Cherson. A light headwind had picked up overnight and now flung chilly foam in his face. Trade ships clogged the docks, rocking in the dark waters of the harbor as cargo was unloaded. He shielded his eyes and gazed up at the rows of sun-bleached houses ascending the peninsula above the shore. Wrapping his robes tightly against the chill, Methodius joined him at the railing. Do you hear those sailors on the docks? Constantine said to his brother. There are at least 3 dialects I don't recognize. Looks like someone is expecting us. Methodius pointed to one of the easternmost docks. Constantine saw a round man in purple robes at the head of a small crowd. Holy Constantine, welcome! The man hailed them with a wave as the sailors roped them to the dock. They stepped off the ship and greeted their hosts. I am George, Archbishop of Cherson. He bowed, and the welcome party with him followed suit. You honor us with your visit. It is rare that we receive visitors from the Greek church this far north. We bring greetings from Patriarch Photius, said Constantine with a smile. Methodius glanced curiously at an old man behind the archbishop. He appeared not to see the brothers, but was humming a familiar melody. Is it tradition to greet your visitors with singing? "Oh," said George, "this is my cleric John. He loves to sing hymns and does so all day long. I don't even notice any more." "But never mind that," said George, pushing through the crowd. "Come, we have prepared quarters for you." They followed him into town, John humming quietly behind them. The brothers tarried in Cherson for several weeks, visiting with George and preaching in the local church, while the emperor's agents gathered details about political and military concerns. Constantine and Methodius worked to learn the local Slav dialect. "You are quick to speak our language," said George with approval. "It will be a great help in communicating the gospel here and further north in Kaiserland." When they told George of their plan to search for Clement's burial place, he eagerly assisted them. "The relics of the second bishop of Rome would be a find indeed. Do you think they are here?" An early Christian legend said he was exiled here by Emperor Trajan and sentenced to hard labor in the mines. Trajan later ordered that he be executed by drowning. George clapped. "You shall have whatever you need for the expedition, and be sure to take John. He will certainly want someone to lead worship, or you will certainly want someone to lead worship when you find the holy site." Methodius looked meaningfully at his brother, but Constantine accepted the archbishop's offer with a gracious smile. It took only a few days to find the small inlet where rumors said a martyr was buried. They took a boat, leaving it on the shoal along the barren coast, and climbed toward the ruins of a tiny chapel. Constantine was the one who spotted the small stone marker. "This is it," he said. "Dig here. It is time we returned the great bishop's remains to his beloved Rome." The box of bones was quickly uncovered. Constantine himself carried the box on his shoulders as they returned to Cherson. The brothers were so excited about their find that even the cleric's constant singing was forgotten. George was overjoyed. "Notify the governor. We must declare a feast day to celebrate our good fortune." They left the sacred relics in Cherson when they set off on the second half of their journey. George promised to take good care of them until they returned from the Kagan's debate. The Kaiser leader's residence was located on the western shores of the Caspian Sea. Constantine's delegation crossed the peninsula to the Methodius Sea and boarded another ship, following the sea to the Don River and then to the Volga River. The Volga emptied into the Caspian Sea in the foothills of the Caucasus Mountains. The rounded spires of the Kagan's palace were visible from the shore. Their arrival was expected, and an attendant immediately ushered them into the Kagan's court. "Hello!" cried their host, rising from his seat with outstretched arms. He was tall, a bit older than they had expected, but his squared beard showed no gray. "I am honored to welcome you into my house. Your reputation as holy men has spread throughout my land." "Thank you," said Constantine. "I am told you have found the bones of one of your saints." "The news has traveled fast. Clement was one of the first great Christian leaders." "I am more curious than ever. Clearly you have the blessing of your God, and tonight you shall tell us about him. My Jewish and Muslim guests have already arrived. We shall feast and debate for many nights." He shouted for his servants to attend to his visitors. That evening they were shown into a great dining hall, where many guests had already arrived. Some chatted in groups around the perimeter. Others had been seated at two broad tables spanning the length of the hall. Scarlet-clad dancers performed to the music of a dozen flutes. The room was warm, despite its great size, and heavy with the scent of perfume and rich food. A servant met the brothers as they entered. "What is your rank, please, Everyone is seated according to title and nobility. Constantine glanced at Methodius, his eyes twinkling mischievously. My grandfather is very well known, and was once a close friend of the most powerful ruler in the world, but he chose to forsake his position and was banished. I have never been able to regain the noble position he once held. Who is this grandfather, and where was his noble residence? His name was Adam, and he walked with God in the Garden of Eden. A clever answer, cried the Kagan, clapping with approval. He had been watching them from his position at the center of the table. These two will be seated near me, for I have many questions to ask them. They sat, and their host took great pleasure in introducing them to his other guests. The Jewish representative, a man called Isaac, was obviously an old friend of the Kagans. He wore a black mantle across his shoulders and had sharp but friendly eyes. Ahmed, the Muslim debater, said nothing as the brothers were introduced, but acknowledged them with a regal nod of his turban. Constantine quickly forgot the names of the others as the Kagan pointed out dozens of distinguished guests around the room. Clearly, only the noblest of Khazar society had been invited to their leader's unusual feast. An army of servants buzzed around the tables, setting steaming platters and bowls before the Kagan. When he nodded his approval, the dishes were distributed to the guests. Constantine took a bite of the stewed meat in front of him. It was moist and pleasantly spicy. The room grew quiet as the Kagan rapped his knuckles on the table. He sent away the entertainers with an impatient wave. Tell me, Honorable Constantine, why does your religion emphasize a book of divine writings? You memorize it and quote it, putting great value on the written word. But the traditional teachings of my people come from the heart instead of the head. Constantine thought for a moment. Suppose you met a naked man who boasted that he had many garments. Would you believe him? A chuckle ran around the room. Of course not, replied the Kagan with a hearty laugh. If he has so many garments, why is he naked? Exactly, said Constantine. Christians do not just boast about our religion. We open the scriptures and show you what our God says. A wise answer. The Kagan raised his mug. Let us drink in the name of the one God who made all of creation. I drink in the name of the one God and his word, Jesus, said Constantine. It is through Jesus the Son, and in the name of the life-giving Spirit, that God created the world. He drained his glass. The corners of their host's mouth twitched in puzzlement. We both speak of the God of creation, but you glorify his Son and Spirit as though they are equal. Is there not only one God? You are right that there is only one God, but he exists in three persons. We must honor all three equally, for the one who honors God, but does not honor his Son or his Spirit, does not honor him fully. You claim that Jesus is God's Son, Isaac interjected, but no one is worthy to even look upon God. How, therefore, can anyone give birth to him? How is it possible for a woman to contain God in her womb? Did not God contain himself in a bush when he appeared to Moses? The Kagan smiled. Another clever answer. The debate continued long after they had finished the meal. The candles were burning low when the Kagan rose from the table. The hour has grown late, he declared. We shall continue tomorrow. The next day they returned to the great hall, and the next night, and the night after that. Each evening the Kagan asked questions as his guests debated which religion was true. Standing in the shadows along the walls, the nobles listened intently. On the final night of feasting, the room was packed with observers, even more than had come on the other nights. As soon as the meal was served, Ahmed rose and gave a stately bow. Please explain, he said to Constantine, why you do not follow Muhammad and his writings in the Quran. Does he not praise your Christ? Yes, his writings praise Christ, but Muhammad calls himself the prophet of God. The book of Daniel in the Bible says that Christ is the prophet of God. Do we reject Daniel in favor of your prophet? The Bible is an honorable book, answered Ahmed, but it is flawed. The word of Muhammad in the Quran is from God. It contains no error. Isaac jumped to his feet. Daniel wrote as he was directed by God's Spirit. Anyone who teaches that Daniel's writings are flawed is a liar, and that includes Muhammad. The nobles burst into conversation, shouting out questions and insults. Quiet! Cried the Kagan. Honorable Constantine, you may make a final statement. Constantine got to his feet and addressed the whole room. Brothers and fathers, friends and children, God has given me faith, without which no one can be saved. Tears glimmered in his eyes as he gazed at those seated around him. His voice was low and intense. If you do not embrace Christ and receive baptism in the name of the Holy Trinity, you will be judged by the Ancient of Days, and he will find you wanting. The room was silent. The Kagan rose. All of my invited guests have spoken. I have heard your many arguments, and it is time for me to decide which religion is true. You shall have my answer in the morning. They rose early the next day and prepared for the journey back to Cherson. I will go down to the sea and make sure our supplies are loaded onto the ship, offered Methodius. You will join me there once you've received word from the Kagan? Constantine nodded. But Methodius was stopped at the door by a servant. The Kagan wishes to see you, please. The brothers glanced at each other. This is it, said Constantine. We will soon know if our mission has been successful. They followed the messenger to the gates of the palace. Hundreds of people had gathered there to see them off. A well-dressed man stopped the brothers as they passed. The words you spoke yesterday have lodged in my heart, said the man. My friends and I discussed your arguments last night after the feast was concluded. We want to learn more about your God and be baptized. Constantine smiled. That is wonderful, my friend. Praise be to God. The crowd parted to make way for the Kagan, who waved a letter in his hand. I have written a message to your emperor. Allow me to read. Honorable Michael, you have sent us holy men, who in word and deed have shown us that the Christian faith is holy. I am convinced it is the true faith. Any of my people who wish to do so shall be baptized. The noble and his friends cheered. You will see that this letter is delivered to your emperor. Of course. Constantine tucked the message safely into his belt. The Kagan bowed low before the brothers. The people of Caesar are friends of the empire. We are at your service whenever you require it. You are most gracious. I'm sure the emperor will send you Christian teachers right away. Thank you, thank you. Now, please accept these gifts to your emperor. He signaled to his servants, who brought forward crates of furs and mounds of spices and jewels. Oh no, said Constantine, shaking his head. The gospel is a free gift of God, and we did not bring it to exchange for earthly treasures. I mean no insult. I merely wish to demonstrate my appreciation to your emperor. Tell me what he would consider a worthy gift. You have Greek prisoners? The Kagan raised his eyebrows. Of course, there are always border skirmishes. Then release them, and allow me to take them back to Constantinople. That will mean more to the emperor than your beautiful gifts. Done! By the end of the day, the brothers and the rest of their entourage, including 200 released captives, had cast off the Kagan's private docks on the Caspian Sea and set out for Cherson. They would preach there for a few more weeks while the emperor's agents finished their work and then returned to Constantinople. Methodius and Constantine met on deck once the ship was underway. Now the Khazars wish to follow Christ. They need a Bible in their language, said Constantine. So do the people of Cherson and the rest of the Crimean Peninsula, agreed Methodius. But none of the Slavic peoples have a written language. I know, but I have mastered their speech, and I think I can devise a written language so we can begin translating the Bible. Methodius laughed. Knowing you, you'll have the project finished before we reach Cherson. Constantine smiled. Methodius, when I dedicated myself to the Lord's work at that monastery on Mount Olympus, I had no idea he would send me on such a mission. He used us to take the gospel to the Khazars and free our own people. And we've made an ally in protecting the empire against the Rus. Photius and the emperor will be pleased. Methodius grinned. I wish the cleric was here to sing. They stood together in silence as the ship moved north along the shore toward the mouth of the Volga River. The sun began to sink behind the mountains, and soon the domed towers of the Kagan's palace were just shadows in the darkening sky. Constantine and Methodius soon returned to Slavic territory as missionaries. They developed a written Slavic language and translated the Bible so the people could read it for themselves. When Constantine died on February 14th, 869, the Roman Pope named him Cyril, and he has been known by that name ever since. Methodius died on the mission field on April 6th, 885. Emperor Michael was murdered by Caesar Basil, who banished Patriarch Photius from Constantinople. Historians now believe that the bones the brothers discovered in Cherson did not belong to Bishop Clement of Rome, but were confused with those of another Christian named Clement, who was martyred on the Crimean Peninsula. Clement of Rome's true remains have never been found.